Hello Year 9 and welcome to the fourth story in our Gothic horror series, Frankenstein. I'm sure many of you will have heard of Frankenstein before. Perhaps you've even seen images like this, and this is what perhaps comes to mind when I say Frankenstein. This kind of green face with screws in the neck, very deformed and bent over. Perhaps that's what comes to your mind when I say that word Frankenstein. However, for those of you who know your literature well and are very clued in, you'll know that in fact Frankenstein is the name of the scientist. If you were to, say, dress up as Frankenstein for Halloween, you would be much better donning a lab coat, perhaps carrying a Bunsen burner. Because Frankenstein is the name of the scientist, Victor Frankenstein, who creates this monster, or at least so rumour would have us believe. The kind of narrative around this story is that the creature that Victor Frankenstein creates is horrible and evil and monstrous. And today I want us to have a think about what a monster is. What does that word mean? And can we rightfully apply that word to the creature that Victor Frankenstein creates? So we're going to have a think about that word monster. We're going to have a wee look at some of the context or background of the novel Frankenstein. And then we're going to read a section describing the creature that Victor Frankenstein creates. So firstly, have a think about the monsters that we've encountered in the stories that we've read so far. So in Axe Murder Hollow, it was of course the ghost of the husband who haunts Axe Murder Hollow and murders anyone who crosses his path. The monster in The Familiar was, you'll remember, the dwarf who follows around Captain Barton, this figure who kind of haunts him and refuses to leave him alone. In Wuthering Heights, the monster was the ghost of Kathy, who haunted that room, was kind of plagued by her memories of love for Heathcliff. And I'm sure you can think of other monsters and maybe other horror stories that you've watched or read. You've got Dracula as well. He's a very famous kind of vampire villain. Another very famous monster is very, very evil, murders people. I'm sure you can think of lots and lots of monsters that we encounter. Even in Harry Potter, you've got Lord Voldemort, who's he's just evil through and through. Lots and lots of monsters. And I suppose monsters are defined by causing fear, like to make people feel afraid. There has to be an element of threat involved in order for someone to be a monster. And usually, monsters are thought of as being evil. So what do you think, how does someone become a monster? What is it that leads someone to become evil and want to hurt other people? We like to think that we're not born this way. Really, I mean, babies shouldn't want to hurt other people. So is it something that we learn from society? Are some people born bad? You may have heard of people being described as a bad egg. It's quite a kind of rude thing to say, I suppose. And yet it draws that question, are some people born evil? Or do they learn that evil behaviour perhaps from others? Is that evil behaviour a result of perhaps abuse as a child, of being brought up in a cruel home? Can monsters change? Can monsters become better people if they are taught and educated and maybe even punished for their crimes? And really significantly, how does someone's appearance affect our perceptions of them? Of course, in the case of Frankenstein and even Lord Voldemort as well in Harry Potter, so much of their monstrosity is based on the way they look. They look terrifying, and therefore they are seen as monstrous. And is that fair, that we base our views of people on how they look? I'm going to show you a few pictures of monsters, and I'm putting that in inverted commas in the next few slides, and I'd like you to tell me, well, have a think about what your impressions are. Here's the first one. Very, very famous monster, Adolf Hitler. Many of you will know Adolf Hitler was the leader of the Nazi Party, and the Nazi Party systematically killed about 11 million people from 1939 to 1945 in World War II, including about 6 million Jews. Was Adolf Hitler born that way? Was he born with the ability to inflict that amount of pain on the world? And of course, Adolf Hitler didn't act alone. He had many men and women working under him, men like Goering and Himmler, these names that you may have heard before. Were those people monsters too? And even the actual Nazi soldiers who were just following commands, are they monsters? Can we define them in that way? Also, you may have heard of this man before, Joseph Merrick, who has been dubbed the Elephant Man. Joseph Merrick was born deformed. He suffered a genetic disorder. He was born in 1862, and because of the way he looked, he spent most of his life working as a circus freak. Where he was kind of displayed for often the rich aristocracy to come and view him and I suppose make fun of him. He suffered a lot of humiliation. He was soon discovered by a doctor who cared for him and enabled him to begin a new life, but he died at the age of 27 because of this awful disease, this condition he'd been born with. Think about why is it that we are scared of deformities? Scared of people who look different? Why do we judge people based on the way they look? Is that judgment fair? Where does that come from? Our judgment of people who look different to us? And finally then, this he's become famous now because of the movie with Zac Efron. The movie was called, I think, Shockingly or Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil and Vile was the name of I think it was a TV series on Netflix. This serial killer, Ted Bundy, who Zac Efron played, and he confessed to murdering 30 women in the 1970s, and people were so shocked because he was very good looking. Ted Bundy was so normal looking that people couldn't believe he was capable of killing these women. Why do we think that the way people look affects their behaviour? There's a lot of research done into this based on Disney movies, that actually when we watch Disney movies, the princesses and princes are always very good looking and they're good. And the villains are always quite ugly. Think of Ursula in The Little Mermaid, or even Scar in The Lion King. The villains are ugly and therefore they're evil. And Disney movies kind of embed this prejudice in our heads. Why do we judge a person's character and their appearance? And Frankenstein questions those ideas. Frankenstein was written by a woman called Mary Shelley. Mary Shelley was the daughter of a famous feminist author called Mary Wollstonecraft. And Mary Shelley was highly educated. She was born in 1797, when of course it wasn't the norm for women to receive a good education, and she wrote Frankenstein when she was only 19. She was married to Percy Bysshe Shelley, who was a famous poet, and he influenced Mary Shelley in her writing of Frankenstein in a big way. He was also responsible for the editing of the novel, and they worked together on it. Mary Shelley wrote this novel when she was on holiday. Mary, her husband, and another poet called Lord Byron went to stay in Geneva. And they rented a villa, and the weather was terrible. It rained incessantly, and they set each other the challenge, because there was nothing else to do, they set each other the challenge of writing a ghost story. And that is how Mary Shelley came up with this idea of Frankenstein. In the early 19th century, when this novel was first written, there was a lot of scientific discovery going on at the time. It was a time of real advancement, and many explorers travelled to the far ends of the earth, the North Pole and beyond, discovering new lands and strange people and trying to find ways of making their lives easier. And the very recent discovery of electricity was thought by some to be the key to life. And scientists had discovered this by experimenting with frogs. They discovered that electricity could reanimate or move dead tissue. And you'll know that if you've ever seen those cartoons where the figures are electrocuted, it affects the way you move. And scientists therefore concluded that electricity was the answer to life. And they began a number of experiments. They began to experiment on body parts, seeing how bodies moved when an electric current was passed through them. And many embraced this new scientific world. Many people were excited about it. But as you can see in the picture on the right, many feared it. Using science to reanimate dead creatures frightened people, and others felt that such experiments were dangerous, and they feared that they went against God's authority on earth. Of course, in the early 19th century, many people were still very religious and felt that only God had the right to give or take life. And Mary Shelley was very aware of those fears, and she explores and exploits them in the novel Frankenstein. And you can see here this 19th century cartoon which shows this scientist using electricity to bring life to a corpse. This process was called Galvanism. And at this point, I would like you to pause the video and watch the movie clip from Frankenstein, which there is a link to on Google Classroom. I'd like you to watch that clip and see how the actor is Kenneth Branagh. He is playing Frankenstein. Watch how he has used electricity, and you'll see the electric eels in the clip, to bring to life his creature. Watch that clip now and then come back to this video. After watching that video, then I'm going to read to you the portion from the novel where this happens. This is early on in the novel. And a bit of background: Victor Frankenstein has studied chemistry in university, and he believes he's discovered the secret of life, which lies in electricity. He is about to give life to a body created from dead limbs by passing an electric current through it. Now let's read the passage now. It was on a dreary night of November that I beheld the accomplishment of my toils. With an anxiety that almost amounted to agony, I collected the instruments of life around me, that I might infuse a spark of being into the lifeless thing that lay at my feet. It was already 1 a.m. The rain pattered dismally against the panes, and my candle was nearly burnt out when, by the glimmer of the half-extinguished light, I saw the dull yellow eye of the creature open. It breathed hard, and a convulsive motion agitated its limbs. How can I describe my emotions at this catastrophe, or how delineate the wretch whom with such infinite pains and care I had endeavoured to form? His limbs were in proportion, and I had selected his features as beautiful. Beautiful? Great God! His yellow skin scarcely covered the work of muscles and arteries beneath. His hair was of a lustrous black and flowing, his teeth of a pearly whiteness. But these luxuriances only formed a more horrid contrast with his watery eyes, that seemed almost of the same colour as the dun white sockets in which they were set, his shrivelled complexion, and straight black lips. So this is Victor Frankenstein's opening description of the creature that he has made. What I would like you to do now is look through that extract again. It has been uploaded to Google Classroom as a Microsoft document. I would like you to see if you can find language features which are used to make this creature seem terrifying. And I'll give you a few clues. You'll be looking for pathetic fallacy. You'll be looking for negative adjectives. You will be looking for rhetorical questions. You will be looking for exclamation marks. And you'll be looking for colour imagery. Those are some clues. You may be able to find others, but see if you can use PEE or Peter to explore how Mary Shelley has used language to make this creature seem terrifying. Good luck, Year 9. I hope you get on well with it, and we'll read a wee bit more of Frankenstein soon. Thank you very much.